Well, welcome everyone to the DAR genealogy meeting. This week we're going to have something kind of unusual. We're going to be talking about land and court records. And we do have with us today our registrar, Valerie Gildehaus. And Valerie is known throughout our state as being one of the more proficient genealogists, and she has lots of tools, and this is her main hobby in life right now. So we're very pleased to have her with us today. Just a little about DAR, if you're here and not a member. We're a nonprofit organization, and we're a service organization. We don't have any political ties or opinions. We simply work on historic preservation, genealogy research, and education, and service to veterans. So those are the three main things that we focus on, but we do an awful lot of things. If you're interested in joining, be in touch with myself or Valerie. And in case I forgot to say, I'm Jill Rendelman, the regent of the chapter. So with that, I am going to go ahead and turn this over to Valerie Gildehaus and let her start her presentation.
Okay, hi everybody. And I'm going to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint presentation, so I'll be talking about that and showing you some slides. And they are going to post this somewhere on the library website, maybe on our website too. So here is my screen. Okay, today I'm going to talk about proving relationships with court and land records. One of the things I think we always wonder about is, when is it enough? If I've got enough information here to prove this relationship, and when you get the first census that includes relationships is 1880. So anytime before that, if you don't have relationship stated, maybe if you have a Bible or some really good record, but usually you have to rely on court and land records to prove these relationships. Okay, so the first thing I do when you're starting out is you check for birth, death, and marriage records. And in birth, death in Illinois, those were only required to be kept starting in 1916, the year my mother was born. There were a few kept in the county level from 1878 to 1915. My grandfather, born in the 1880s, he did have a birth certificate, but there weren't very many. I don't think even 10 or 20% of those births and deaths are recorded prior to 1916. So if this varies from state to state, of course. Every state is a little bit different on how and when they were required to keep records. So if you're going before 1916, you can check the census, because 1880 does give relationships. But then I'd first check for will, estate, or a probate record. If you're checking in Illinois, the circuit clerk has these. If you're checking land records in Illinois, the county clerk has these. Now you can check ancestry.com, however, and it's an excellent site, but that is a pay service. So if you're going to, they do offer at the Carbondale Library, ancestry.com is available to use at the library computers. And if you have a Carbondale library card, you can go in there, but you do have to call and make an appointment, because the library is not just generally open at this time. And many probate records are on Ancestry. The other thing, in addition to FamilySearch records, which we're going to talk about at some length, we're going to look at the FamilySearch Wiki, so you can find out where your records would be kept for the county and when your county was formed and a lot of different stuff, so you know you're looking in the right place. Okay, first I'm going to show you on Ancestry. If you have an Ancestry account, or if you go into the Carbondale Public Library and you call ahead at this point and make an appointment, you can use this on their site. If I'm looking for a Tennessee will, those wills and probate records are available on Ancestry. Now, the only tricky thing is it appears that they're all indexed, and they are not all indexed by a long shot. Some are and some are not. So when I get ready, if I get to this page, if I'm looking for Tennessee will or probate, there's a little tiny down arrow down after county. And if you click that down arrow, then the county, it will open up the list of counties. So I'm going to Rutherford County, and then this is all a long list of things that are available. In every one of these, you can click on it, and it's going to open up a film strip of images of the actual original county records. And this goes on, if you see this bar, there's quite a bit beyond this. You just scroll down until you get to what you're interested in. Now, we're going to go to FamilySearch, though, and do most of the search, because this is almost entirely free, and they have so much material. Many of the probates, a few are still restricted, but not too many. And most all the land records now, sometimes you find something that's not there, but most of them are there. New stuff's added every day, so check back frequently. Now, when you join to go to FamilySearch, you do need to create an account the first time you log in. And this is sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They're not going to contact you and try to get you to join or anything like that. They don't try to charge you for anything, so there's nothing tricky about it. But they do like to keep track of who's logging on and make sure that it's only people that are appropriate. So if you have not created an account, the first time you need to click on this and create account. After you've created an account, you will click on sign in when you open this page. Now, the first thing I'm going to look for, if I'm not too familiar with my county, is the research wiki. So when FamilySearch opens and you log in, over here it's got my name on the right upper corner. It's got my name and my little picture. This is not a recent picture, obviously. Okay, so I'm going to click on search, and then I'm going to go to the bottom one of these choices, the research wiki. Now that's going to take me to this page, and up here in the corner is where you can start typing. So I'm going to search for Granville County. So I started typing Granville, and this is what I get. It pops up all the things that are Granville, and then I'm going to click. I can click on any of these. I'm going to click on Granville County, North Carolina. Now, here's my long list of things. And again, this goes down. If you scroll down on your right side, this goes down for many pages. It tells all about Granville County. Oops. Okay. Where the courthouse is, so you can call her right there if you need to. Further down on the page, you'll find a list of when births, deaths, and marriages start in the county. And it also tells me that in North Carolina, they didn't require this until 1913. And that only came into general compliance around 1920. It also tells you when the land and the probate records, and on this, they start at the formation of the county. So that's good news. We do have intact records for this county. And they are both land and probate and court records are all available online for free. Now, this also tells you if there's been record loss. So you want to note that, because you don't want to waste a lot of time searching for something where the county courthouse burned and nothing exists. And down here is the boundary changes. So it tells me when it was established and what was the previous county. So if I knew my family was there prior to 1746, I would want to check out Edgecombe County. If you go further down on the page, there'll be a little map with the surrounding counties, and you can click to see if maybe one of those counties was established after maybe 1830. A county that had been in Granville now goes to a different county when a new county is formed. So what things you want to pay attention to on this research wiki are the date of your county formation, the date of earliest records, because some of them may be lost, some of them may have burned, or they just might not have been kept till 1913. boundary changes of your county. Different counties might have broken off. And your ancestor could be listed three or four different counties, but never have moved at all, depending on when the county formation changed. Okay, there's a long list on these pages of the wiki with lots of links. Anything that's blue, or after you've clicked on it, mine turns purple, that's a link you can click on and it will take you to another page that gives you something about that county. Okay, now here I'm going to show you how to get to the court and land records. So we go back to the beginning to Granville County on FamilySearch, and then we go to search, and then we go to catalog. Now, once I click on catalog, right there in the middle where I've circled in red, I started typing Granville and this list pops up underneath. And I know I'm going to search for, as soon as I see United States, North Carolina, Granville, that's what I click on. Now there's a lot more choices here, so you can scroll down if you need to. So here's a list of what's available for Granville County. Now this is one of the places where I think it's a little difficult, because you look at this list and you think, okay, well, there's the list. Well, every one of these items you can click on, and when you click on it, expands and you see an itemized list of what's available, and you can click on those links. So the first one I'm going to click on is where it says cemeteries, and I know from this that there are 66 records that have to do with cemeteries. So when I click on this, cemeteries, here I've blown it up a little bit so we can see it better. Here's a list of the cemetery records. You can see some of them are from the North Carolina DAR group. Several of these are. Now, these are always good to look at. All these records will have different things, so I would just look through them and see what you can find. Some books are on here. Some genealogies are on here, or published records of cemeteries. And you click on the link, they might or might not have a digital copy. If they have a digital copy, you can usually look at it and download whatever pages you're interested in. Be sure and get the title page of whatever you're interested in if you think you're going to use it to prove a record. Okay, so here is if I clicked on, let me go back one. Okay, I clicked on the cemetery records, this first one that's purple now, and here's what comes up next. And this will be very similar in the land records and the court records, so this is kind of an overview of it. And down here at the bottom, in the bottom right, it shows format, and if it has that little camera there, that means that you can actually see the images. And these are the original courthouse images that are kept in the courthouse or an archive somewhere. And you can download them right on your computer without ever leaving the house. I got a lot of work done last year when we couldn't go anywhere. Okay, now we're going back to we're going to look now at the court records. Well, we're going to click on probate records in a few minutes, but I just marked in red a few things here that are specifically court records. There are 14 under court records, 1 under divorce, 4 under guardianship, and the probate records, there's 20 items. So you could go one at a time and click on these and see what's available, and I'm sure there would be some worthwhile stuff if you follow up with it. Now, here are the clicked on probate, and this is all the probate items, the 20 items under Granville County. Everything that's blue, or if I clicked on it already, it's now purple. All of those things are links to the actual film strips containing images of the pages. So let's take a look at a few of them and what you can discover when you go to them. Okay, here's a close-up so we can read it a little better. Anything that, like this, it says wills and estate papers, and it lists North Carolina Superior Court. And here it lists North Carolina County Court of Pleas and Quarter Sessions, Granville County. Then I know that's a record actually created by the county. Now, sometimes they also have published indexes, and those are worth looking at. They might have missed stuff or misread things, but they often have an index and help you find records. Okay, so I clicked on the one that said Granville County, North Carolina estate records, 1746 to 1919, and here's what opens up. Now, every one of these little cameras means that there's a film strip here that you can open and look at page by page. These records are pretty well kept and better organized than most. And in this case, every estate had its own file. So Lewis Anderson had a file, and whatever papers they have them in a folder, and they are actually in a box, and they took these papers out and filmed them one at a time. So the first box goes Lewis Anderson to Elijah Barnett. So you need to go down on this, and there's a lot more. This is just the top, and find alphabetically where yours will be. Now, my Phillips family was from Granville County. So I went down, so I found the one that would contain the surname Phillips, and that was about in the middle. So here's what opens when I clicked on the film that has for the surname Phillips on it. First of all, you will not want to note these down. You want to note down what film strip it was on. Also, what image number, and we start on 1 of how many images. Over here on the upper left are your controls to make it larger or smaller, or this one will take you either to a full 1 page, just 1 picture, or many pictures. Now make sure you note over here on the right side where it says download. So if you get something that you do want to save, you can actually click this and download it right to your computer, and then you can print it out or do whatever you want with it, get it ready to send into National. Okay, so I look at this and I think, okay, I don't know where my Roger Phillips, I know had an estate here, and I don't know where he's going to be. So I look up here and there are 1,725 images. So I'm going to go to probably, I think I went to page image 90. I just highlight that one and type 900, I think. Yeah, so I went to image 900 right up here. I typed it in and pressed enter, and there is Charles Phillips. So mine, Phillips Charles, and it has a date on. Now on this one, the dates don't matter because they're not done chronologically. They're only done alphabetically, but you can identify it quickly by having the year of the probate. So I guesstimate where my Phillips family will be. You can go 1 page at a time by clicking on the forward and backward arrows up here by image, or you can highlight that 900 and go ahead 10 pages, 50 pages, whatever you think might be where your ancestor, where your record might be. Now, here's this was the first page, and I've been looking for this for 40 years. I knew that my ancestor, Bennett Phillips, was the orphan of Roger Phillips, but I never found anything that actually said that. I had various records and land records that made me able to prove it. But after about 40 years, when I was looking at this just a year or two ago, I found this says guardian, their appointed guardian of Bennett Phillips, orphan of Roger Phillips, deceased. And an orphan doesn't necessarily mean child of, but in this case, with the ages and everything, it is the child. Now, an orphan does not mean both parents are dead either. It might only mean one parent is dead. And an orphan, upon occasion, might be called the orphan of an uncle that had left money to them. It's anyone underage who has an estate that needs to be taken care of. So anyway, here it is, and it's all laid out nice. I wish I could have found it 40 years ago. Make sure that you made a notation now when I showed you before. Your catalog item name. Now in that place, it was Granville County, North Carolina State Records and the date. your FamilySearch film number, which is right here. And then the next line, images, and I wrote down, I discovered, and it's a good idea to write down what images it was, because later on, if you want to go back and look at it because you didn't copy all 14 pages, then you might want this number, and it's a lot easier to get to if you don't have to search again. And I click how many images there are because that helps me know I'm in the right place. And then the title of the record that I'm looking at was the estate of Roger Phillips. Now in the future, if I want to go to this, I need that film number, FamilySearch film number. That's not a hashtag, by the way, in my world, that's a film number, a symbol for number. And you can go here and you can just type that in where I've circled in red, or you can push enter after you type it, or type it and push search it down for lower on the page. Both work. Okay, I would check out the other court records that are available. I just click on any of these and see what comes up and looks at guardianship. Now, for some reason, there's nothing listed. I don't think they had a separate guardianship book in 1783, or whenever that record was that we were just looking at. So I didn't find anything under guardianship, but there might be something under these other records. So now here's again, we're going to go back to our probate records and see what we find under wills. Here's our long list of different things in Granville County. And we're going to look at the bottom one, which is wills. Now, this is what opens when I click on that link. And again, we've got all these nice little cameras over here on the side, and every one of these represents a film that I can open and look at and download the images if I wish. Note that in the general index, for wills, there's often a master index or a general index. And in this case, volume 1 goes from 1749 to 1875. And then there's a volume 2 and 3. And then there are individual volumes. So usually you're going to check out your general index first, and then check out the individual volumes for the years that you think your ancestor or family member might have left a record. Now here's the whole list of wills records that are available for Granville County. And as you can see, they go all the way up to 1943. So you could, if they had property and left a will, not everyone did, then you might be able to trace your whole family tree just through this record. So let's take a look at the index first. Again, you click on that index, click on the over on the far right side, click on the little camera, and that opens the film. Up at the top left is your film number. Then I see there are 365 images. And we're on image 1 here. Again, note on the right side that you can download these one image at a time if you choose to, which is really worth doing if you find something worthwhile. So I'm going to type in up there where it says the number 1. I'm going to highlight the 1 and type in. I'm just going to go about, I'm not sure how far. Let's see, I went to 224 is where I found a record. I often start about halfway through the film strip and see where you are and then go back or forth. So I actually, on page 221, I found this record for Mary Moore, who was the mother of Bennett Phillips. She's remarried, so her last name is Moore. Now, this is a particularly handy record because this has devisor. That's the person who left something in a will, and devisee. So it has a list right here of all the heirs in her will. And then it has where it was prodated, your date, February court, 1821, the book, and the page number. So next we're going to go find that book. Here's a few things to keep in mind about probate records. You might find 1 page or 100 pages. They might have a division of the estate, which includes all the heirs. Maybe it will identify all the heirs by their relationship, son, daughter, niece, nephew, grandson. If there is no will, the estate would be divided among the legal heirs, and that's where the land records often will come in to be very important. You should know that before the last century, if there's no will in most areas, the widow was entitled to 1/3 of the estate as her dower right. And usually this dower right was only for her lifetime, and when she died, it went to whoever her husband had willed it to. The rest would be divided equal parts to the children, or if a child was deceased, it would usually go to the grandchildren or the children of that child, their share. Now, probate or an estate or will is usually begun within a few months of a person's death. But if no one questioned the settlement of the estate, it might not be open for many years. Same with land records. I think the farthest after a death to when the land was settled was over like about 150 years. But usually it's within a few years. But if you don't find anything within a few years, keep looking. They may not have done anything for a while. Okay, so back to my list of wills, and we were going to look at that volume 8. So when I open the index, first thing I'm going to look for is an index to volume 8. Sometimes those master indexes are hard to read, or they missed something, or they misspelled something. So I always like to check the individual volumes for an index. Now usually they're in the front, sometimes they're in the back. So you need to check both and see what they have. And in this one, it lists Mary Moore's will on page 428. And it also says DO, that's ditto, is an inventory on page 429. Now, if you look over here about halfway down on the right side, there's also the will for George L. Moore, which is her husband. Okay, just remember, keep in mind that not all records will be in the index. Just because there is an index to a state or county's probate records does not mean the record you're interested in is indexed. Some records on FamilySearch are locked in that little camera, which we like so much, has a little key over it. Then sometimes you cannot access them at this time. Check back, they probably will be available in the future. So you should search individual records and through every index if you don't find your person in the master index. Now, when you're looking through these film strips, many of them have more than one item. So volume 1 and 2 might be on the same film strip. So about halfway through, the page numbers are going to start over with volume 2. And we talked about the master index. That may cover many years, and there may be indexes at the beginning and end of each volume. So check them all, and check for other names associated with the family you are researching. If you know the names of who the daughters married, the aunts and uncles, the nieces and nephews, grandchildren's names, it's a good idea to look for those, because the records you might be looking for could be under one of those names too. Now we're going to talk about land records next. We're called deeds. Usually those are under deeds in the courthouse. When you don't find a probate record, you should look for a deed. Deeds can be used alone or in the combination with other records to prove relationship. Many of the same methods we use for the probate records will be used in searching these land records. Now, here I'm looking back at Jackson County, and I went back. You go back for another county, you go to FamilySearch, search, click on the catalog, you start typing Jackson, select Jackson County, Illinois, push enter. And down here, this is the list of all the things they have on Jackson County. Now I know, because I've looked, Jackson County probate records are available on Ancestry, but at the current time, you cannot open them on FamilySearch. That may change in a month or a year, and they are available locally at the courthouse or out at IRAD, one or the other. But we're going to take a look now at the land and property records and how that index works. Okay, so I clicked on the land and property, and I know that there are 4 items, and therefore the deeds. The author is Jackson County, Illinois, so I know that's the actual deeds. And sometimes they'll have other stuff that's worth looking at, like here's a formation and settlement. This is a book, so they might have a copy of the original book or not. But I'm going to click on this deeds for Jackson County. Now we have a lot of Jackson County deeds, and they are all available online. So Jackson County land records, this one up at the top here, note that they have a grantee index and a grantor index, and then the dates that follow. The grantee is the person receiving or buying the land, and the grantor is the person selling or giving the land. So I'm going to start with the grantor because that should have the surname I'm interested in. The grantee may or may not have the surname I'm interested in. Okay, so again, sir, you do want to search both of these for the name you're interested in. Check each volume check each volume in those indexes also for the names you're interested in. Check the surname you're interested in, and it's worth taking the time to check out all deeds with that surname. Often, only the first name in a long list of heirs is in the index, and there are a lot of other names that aren't in that index that might be the ones you're looking for, and I'm going to show you an example of that. Now, this is the actual index, and I was looking for John Butcher. And down here, a little over halfway down, this one's a little harder to read. Remember, there are the plus and minuses up in the top left when you open the film strip, so you can make this larger if you need to. But this gives you a lot of information. I'm going to blow it up so you can see it better. John Butcher is the grantor by Master and Chancery. This is who they sold it to. They have the date. It was written. The deed might be written on one day and filed on maybe the same day, maybe many years later. And it also has up above is the letter U for the volume number, and the page number it is in volume U. So in volume U, notice there are two volumes in this, so I will know that when I go to the film strip, I'm going to look halfway through, it's going to switch to volume V. I open the film strip, I see there are 690 images. I know 619 is probably pretty near the end of the first volume, so I'm going to go about halfway through. I just guesstimate here. Type that in and push enter, and it will take you to that page. Now, when I get to that page, I can see most of the records, they have a page number at the top, and hopefully it's legible. Sometimes it's not. That makes it even more difficult. But I see here, this took me to page 604 and 5. Note 2 images on each page. So if I add 7 or 14 more pages to the number 340, I type 347 over here and press enter. That should take me to the right page. And it did in this case. Just go forward and backward if it didn't. So I found here the deed. I know that John Butcher is one of the people involved in this deed. Again, make sure that you make a copy of the number, the images, and the image number, and that you can download this if it's an interest. Now I'm going to blow up the top of this deed so you can see what information this gives you. You want to look at all the names. Only one name, John Butcher, was in the index. But if you start reading this, you discover this is actually the land of Jacob Butcher, who is deceased. That DEC means deceased. And then it has a long list starting on the end of the third line of who had to sign off on this land. These are all heirs of Jacob Butcher. And this document could be used in a court of law or in a lineage society like the DAR to prove a relationship. So here are all the people that I know are related to Jacob Butcher: John Butcher, Huldah Butcher, Lucinda Davis, Huldah Sorrells, George Butcher, Mary Butcher, Catherine King, and all these people. And then it says where the land is in Jackson County, 80 acres. It takes a little practice to read this if you haven't done it for a while. You can even figure out the degree of relationship by finding the people in their marriage records. Census records were available. Jacob died in 1860. So there are 1850, 1860 census and Jackson County marriage records. So I'm going to look for these people in the Jackson County records and see if I can figure out who they are and how they're related. So I actually did this for one of our neighboring chapters about 10 years ago. They were trying to prove that Lucinda Davis's parents were one of John Butcher and Huldah Butcher. So I found Lucinda Davis in 1850, and I found that Lucinda had married in 1847, and this excerpt from the 1850 census is exactly right. She has a 2-year-old child. She'd married 3 years before, so this is perfect for the Lucinda Davis, whose maiden name I found from the marriage records. Occasionally this is a married name, but I'm assuming it's a maiden name at this point. That should be just right for her. Now I find John Butcher in another household, not real close to Lucinda Davis, but I find John with what appears to be a wife from the age is Huldah. And they do, if you look, you will find their marriage record to John J. Butcher and Huldah in Jackson County marriages in the right time frame to be the parents of Lucinda. And then here's Jacob. He was 14 in 1850. And the probate record for Jacob, which I did find, was in 1860. So he was 24. He was a young man who had not married yet. So when he died, his estate was divided between his parents and his living siblings. And several other names here you can identify as being Catherine. I think Catherine King was one of the heirs. Most of these people are listed in that deed. So I did not find, for this case, there was no will, estate, or probate for John Butcher that would name his parent or his children. But we found one for Jacob, and it said right in there that he died 3rd of August, 1860, leaving no wife or children. And it also named his father, Jacob John Butcher, who was the administrator of his estate. The only Jacob Butcher in the 1850 census is the 14-year-old living with John and Huldah. So there's nobody else I really need to consider as this possible person. And Lucinda was an heir of Jacob Butcher, along with John and Huldah, and Lucinda's age and her marriage record show that she must be a daughter of John and Huldah. And this was accepted, this deed, as proof by the DAR that she was a daughter. Now, here are a few little definitions that you should know these if you're going to look in records. There are lots more, but these are just some main ones. If you died testate, you left a will. If you died intestate, you did not leave a will, but there still may be an estate or a probate record. The heirs are a person who's legally entitled to the property of another person on that person's death. And remember, if you're a wife, you're only entitled in some states to 1/3 of your husband's estate, usually just for your lifetime. A relic, I love this word, that usually is referred to a widow. Well, it could be a widower also, but usually you find the relic of John Jones, that's his widow. Now, again, we mentioned the dower right. Remember that widow is entitled to 1/3 of husband's property at his death. Now, here's a great word, primogeniture. This is mostly in colonial days. By the 1800s, this had been abolished. But in the early days, the oldest son usually or often inherited the land. So I have a deed from my Bennett Phillips. He and his mother are the only ones that signed the deed because he father died in 1783 and it was in the days of primogeniture, so they did not share in the father's land. Only the oldest son and the mother had a claim. And a quitclaim deed means you quit your claim. You released any claim you had to your right to property. This is often used with other brothers and sisters who have moved away will sign this to release their claim on the family farm or other property. Here's a couple other terms that you'll see in indexes. If you see et al., John Butcher et al., they often will have that, and that means they're others. So you will have John Butcher as the main person, but that will be followed by other names. And often those are the legal heirs. And et exor means and spouse. Before the 1850s, these land records are often the only place you find the woman's name. She had to sign the deeds because she had to release her right of dower. Now, remember we mentioned before that a deed may be filed right after the death, or it may be filed many years later. And here's an example. Let's say John Jones dies in 1840. Intestate, which we know means he did not leave a will. He left a living wife. The wife and the younger children are still on the family farm, and the youngest son is farming. So the family just says, yeah, stay there, and they don't file any claims. 10 years later, mama passes. The youngest son has lived there with his family, been farming it. Maybe he's given something every year to his brothers and sisters, maybe not. But the family says that's okay. He can just keep farming it. We're okay with that. Now, 40 years later, after the youngest son passes, this is 50 years after the John Jones died, he dies and the other heirs want their share. So they may squabble over this, how it's going to settle it for several years, offers back and forth. And then they finally sign off, and there will be a quitclaim deed or a regular deed in 1895 dealing with the death of somebody who died in 1840. So don't give up just because your deed does not appear within a few years of the death. You can also use these deeds sometimes to tell the relationship and the degree of the relationship to the deceased. If John Doe Jones died in 1850 and his estate was worth $500, a estate lists 8 heirs but does not say their relationship. 3 get $100, 2 get $50, 4 gets $25. And you're assuming these heirs are his children. You'll need to look at other marriage and census records to determine if the ages are correct, because it's possible they are his nieces and nephews or his brothers and sisters. So if it lists James Jones got 100, and this breakdown, from that it tells me that John Jones had 5 children, or maybe siblings, that were living at his death, or left heirs who were living. Each child got $100. One child was deceased and got 2 heirs, so they got 50 each. One child was deceased with 4 heirs, so they each got $25. Now, going through these land records can be very time consuming, but very rewarding, because it will prove relationships and you'll find out all sorts of interesting things that you never knew. Now, to wrap this up, I'm going to show you a few records that I found just in this past year while I was sitting at home with not able to go anywhere, and I was searching through these old deeds. In Maricopa County, I had an ancestress named Sally or Sarah Britton, and she disappears around 1805, 1806, and her husband remarries in 1809. So we had always assumed that she had passed away. The burial site was lost, and then he remarried. So when I'm looking for her to prove her relationship to her father, I find in 1811, Sally Britton of Raynham in Bristol County, Massachusetts, formerly the wife of Robert Britton of Westmoreland, New Hampshire, Robert's still living there, remarried, sold for $1,000 the heir to the real estate of Jonathan Fales, that was her father, deceased, and 1/4 part of that is set to my mother, Elizabeth Britton, as her dower. Interesting relationship here because Sally Fales married Robert Britton Jr., and after Fales Britton's father died, that was Jonathan Fales, her mother, before she married Robert Jr., her mother had married Robert Sr. So Elizabeth Britton is the wife of Robert Britton Sr., widow of Jonathan Fales. And it also meant the right of her real estate of Stephen Fales, who was under guardianship. That's her brother. And it's signed in 1810 in Raynham, and she signs it Sarah Britton. So now I know her actual name was Sarah, which I had assumed before, and that she can write, also an interesting thing to find out. Now, this next one, the will was written in 1806, and it was filed down here at the bottom in 1812. The heirs of Jonathan Fales, late of Walpole, deceased. First one is Jonathan's widow, Elizabeth, now married to Robert Britton. This is another daughter. This is another son of Elizabeth. And down here, the other daughter, Robert Britton Jr., and Sarah, his wife, of Westmoreland in Keene County, New Hampshire. And this actually goes on and says this land came from the state belonging to Ebenezer Fales, who was Jonathan's father. I noted here too that Sarah Britton signed this, but even though Robert Britton Jr. signed it, was mentioned in 1806, he did not sign it in 1812, indicating their divorce occurred in that time. Now, these are the later heirs, and Fanny Britton, who married her cousin Stephen Britton, is one of the children of Sarah Fales Britton. And this goes through and describes the relationships, lots and lots of information. And these 3 deeds span 38 years and cover 4 generations of relationships, so quite a bit there. Now, and just to confirm, Robert and Sarah were in fact divorced. Haven't found the divorce record yet, but I'm still looking. I found in 1812, Sarah Britton, a divorced single woman, was declared incapable of taking care of herself and was declared a ward of court and put under guardianship. And the last thing, then I look back, remember to check where the counties were formed. Norfolk County, where these last records were from, was created in 1793 from Suffolk County. So if I look back to 1790, before 1793, into Suffolk County, I find the record. These are just short excerpts. There are several pages long. Elizabeth Fales of Walpole, widow of Jonathan, and it lists his 3 children. Says these are minors. I know they're between 14 and 21. And his son, Stephen Fales, is a minor. And then I go through all this stuff, and it all actually says in here, Elizabeth Fales intermarried with Robert Britton. So that confirms my supposition that Robert Britton and he was the father of Robert Britton Jr., who married his stepsister, Sarah Fales. And both Sarah and her brother Stephen were eventually declared incompetent. I don't know why. I wish they'd said why, what was exactly wrong here, but they both were wards of the state. So that's pretty much wraps up my presentation, and I'll turn it back over to Jill.
Okay, thank you so much, Valerie. That's a lot of information, and I didn't say it in the beginning, but I think you all know this has been live streamed onto the Facebook website for Daughters of the American Revolution, the Daniel Brush chapter, and that's thanks to the hard work of Jennifer Robertson at the Carbondale Public Library, for which we could not do these webinars without her. So we thank Jennifer and the Carbondale Public Library. There is like a lot of questions I have. Let me see if I, hold on. Okay, where do you go to find out if land owned was part of a veteran's pension?
Well, there are a lot of places to go. There's a site called Fold 3, and
Called
that
what?
Fold 3, FOLD, and then the numeral 3. Now that is a pay site, but they do have a few free records. They have the records of pensions for the War of 1812 are all on there, and the entire record, and it's free. They do have all the Revolutionary War pensions. You may have to pay to get access to those. You have to pay a membership, which I have. They on Ancestry, they have an index to all the pensions. And so they will be listed in there. At the National Archives, which is sort of operating, they might have a separate bounty land file for a pension. It's also that will list bounty land records. So there are a lot of, that's like a whole topic in and of itself.
Okay. Okay, another one. Before Illinois was a state, there were people who settled the state. They got to keep their plots as squatters prior to this, or after the state became a state, formal state. Is there any way of knowing if your relatives was a squatter prior to 1816, or if they bought the land outright?
Well, there are several sites where you can search for land records, which I don't have it off the top of my head. There's the Bureau of Land Management. And let's see, there's a link. I'll put them on I think most of the people on today are members of our website. So I'll put a couple links to the Bureau of Land Management. And that also lists land grants, which are not, or land warrants. They sell land patents, land grants, land warrants, and you can search them by state. And you can bring up a copy on this site. This is a free site of the original patents. So I'll try to get that and put it up. We'll post it either later today or tomorrow on our DAR website for our chapter. So if you aren't on that, let Jill or I know, and we can make sure you can get access to that.
Okay, let's see. Can you talk about women's rights to land that they inherited from their family and then later remarried?
Well, that would be a short talk. There weren't any.
Okay, so if a woman got married and her family, say she was the only child and her family passed away, her mother and father passed away, and she inherited her parents' land, then would that land belong to her and her husband, or
it would
just
belong to her husband?
to her husband?
Dispose of it, or do what? Now, if he's a decent husband, he wouldn't do that, but he could do it. Yeah, and if you are not a married woman, then your father or your brother or your uncle would probably be able to dispose of your land. Well into the late 1800s, women could not own land in their own right in Illinois. But they did, some of them did actually, but that was kind of the exception to the rule. And they only were entitled to a third of their husband's land at his decease. And that often usually was only until he died. Now, some of them did start willing it to their wives, and they didn't strictly follow this. But if a husband came in and sold this property, you did not really have any recourse, because he had the right to do it. I'm not sure exactly what date that ended, but it was at least the late 1800s.
Okay. Well, I know there is a old family story in our history, and it's not just a story, it's been documented that, we had a woman who married, and that situation occurred. She inherited some land, and then her husband had her declared incompetent and actually put her in some kind of an asylum or jail or something. And so he not only took her land, he also, had all the children. And then in some way, he found a way to get remarried, I guess by declaring her insane or something. So it's like really scary to be a female landowner in those days. I guess
Yeah.
I guess you just didn't have any
Yeah,
right.
you didn't. And that's why today it's so hard to get anyone committed, even if they should be committed, because they are incompetent, can't tell. Those homeless people, a lot of them should be in a home somewhere, but you can't make them go if they don't want to go. And that's why, because people used to abuse it.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. I've got a note here from Elizabeth Hartman, and she says, for documenting my research, I've installed extensions. I think she's talking in a new language. I've installed extensions on my browsers that allow you to copy both the page and title and URL via right-clicking, which I use to insert into Excel spreadsheets. So that's just sort of a little hint. I don't know, Valerie, if you've ever used that.
No, I don't do that. I save the original document and then I just make sure I note where it came from.
All right. Well, one of these days, maybe you can write us a letter, a book, I mean, a whole book on all this. Let's see. And then someone says, I have been able to access Civil War pension records on Fold 3, but I haven't tried Revolutionary War.
Okay, now on Fold 3, they do not have the whole pension record. For Civil War, they only have an index to most of them. I think there are a few pension records now, but the National Archives has lots of pension records, some of which are over 100 pages, and those are not on Fold 3. Unfortunately, they're not really functioning very well at the National Archives. They'd gotten it before this COVID business started. You could write them and say, I want a pension record. Now, they weren't free. I think they were $75 a record. But then you got a lot of good information and they'd send you a digital copy of the entire record. And so I got a bunch of those that were down to about 2 weeks turnaround time. And then when COVID started, that's all fallen apart and they're really hard to get them. But usually they just have very brief pension records. Some of the southern states actually have more pension records for Mississippi than they do for Illinois on Fold 3 at this point. Revolutionary War, though, the entire file is on there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So Valerie, before we leave, I'd like everyone to see one of the things that Valerie has done is taken a lot of courses and done a lot of things in the world of genealogy. And in Daughters of the American Revolution, you often get a pin for that. And so Valerie, could you kind of stand up so we could see all of your pins?
Okay, I did, since I haven't been able to wear it for so long. Do you have my screen up there?
Yes.
Okay. This is my pin. I have proven 15 ancestors who served in the Revolutionary War. And these are my things for courses, genealogy courses 1, 2, 3, DNA. And I've also done the Registrar course, which I have another bar, but I have to get it added to this. So, and then these are the states and things I've donated to and different things. But it does take a lot of work. You have to prove every one of these, and then you're entitled to buy the pin if you choose to.
Okay, thank you. But DAR does have 3 online genealogy courses that you can take at your own speed.
Those are very good too. I highly recommend taking those. It would be good to have somebody besides me in our chapter that knew the proper way to do the research to prove records. Because when I started, Jeannie O'Boyle, who'd been the registrar before me, had passed away, so I didn't have anyone to ask. But it'd be good if anybody's interested to take those courses, and I would be happy to give you some stuff to research and then review it with you.
Okay. And do you need to be a member of DAR to take those courses?
Yeah, I believe you do. I think you would have to be a member of DAR. I've not checked, but I'm pretty sure you do.
Okay. Well, for those of you who may be on, who are not members of DAR, I can tell you that if you give Valerie your birth certificate and marriage certificate and your parents' birth and deaths and marriages and your grandparents, she will find a revolutionary patriot in your
There have been a
history.
couple I couldn't find somebody for, but for the most part, I can find one within a matter of maybe 4 or 5 hours. If I
Yeah.
know your parents' names and where they were born, and if they were obviously born in this country, at least one of them.
Okay. Well, again, thank you very much, Valerie, and thank you, Jennifer Robertson, for hosting this from the Carbondale City Library. We appreciate your help, and we look forward to our next meeting, which is April 21st, and that will be a membership meeting only, but we will have other programs throughout the year and hopefully be looking for those on the library website. All right.